Welcome aboard the USS Aranome. To become a member of our crew, please visit perfectorganism.com/support. As a patron of Perfect Organism, you'll receive exclusive perks and early access to content. Incoming audio transmission received. Please proceed to Subdeck 3 to begin playback. Thank you, and welcome aboard.
All right, sweethearts, what are you waiting for? Breakfast in bed? Another glorious day in the Corps. Day in the Marine Corps is like a day on the farm. Every meal's a banquet. Every paycheck a fortune. Every formation a parade. I love the Corps.
Where's Basket? Let's rock!
Welcome to Perfect Organism, the Alien Saga podcast. I'm your host, J.M. Prater, and today we have this is kind of another spotlight in fandom, and this is another entry into a series that we're doing where we wanted to talk to kind of larger players in certainly the Alien fandom, but fandom at large, just to kind of give back and say, hey, these are the people who make fandom what it is. And today, my guest is Bryant Dillon, who is, are you the founder of Fanbase Press?
Co-founder, yeah.
Co-founder, awesome. And today, I just kind of wanted to talk with you, and Brian and I met up briefly at the San Diego Comic-Con a couple weeks ago, and that was kind of unexpected. I knew that you were going to be there, but of course I was hanging out with Dane and Matt, of course.
Right.
Awesome guys. And
cool,
of course, I've seen you in Building Better Worlds. I don't know if you were in the Weyland-Yutani Bulletin. I'm not on that group anymore. But
I basically joined with you guys when you started building Better Worlds.
Yeah. So I've seen you around, and then I don't know why, but I think I did an interview for Fanbase Press.
Yes.
But not with you.
No. It was through me. It was a while ago, but it was for one of our Alien Day celebrations content, and yeah, it was a written interview for that.
That's right.
one.
That's right. Okay.
But you guys were just getting the podcast started, and we were really big fans here at Fanbase Press of the podcast, so we wanted to make sure to highlight you guys during that content.
Awesome, and that was great. Those Alien Days are really fun days.
They are.
So before we get into Fanbase Press, I just kind of want to know a little bit more about you and your kind of journey into the Alien series. We're a large community, but we're definitely not Star Wars or the Marvel communities. We're our own thing. So I'm curious kind of how this all happened for you.
Well, I guess like many people, I caught the alien bug very early in life. I around 4th or 5th grade came across the old school Aliens video game, the arcade game at a local mall, and but yeah, I became fascinated with this video game, and sort of badgered my parents into letting me watch the second movie, given that was what it was based on. So I started with the second movie and just blew my mind. Began devouring the films, and funny enough, it actually ties into my work at Fanbase Press, because comic books were something that, of course, I knew of them as a child, but I really got the bug for comic collecting and comic reading through the Alien franchise. I had exhausted what movies, I think there were 3 at the time, I could watch when I was in 4th or 5th grade. And one day someone, a peer of mine, came to the class and he was like, "Look at these," and he pulled out some of the early Dark Horse Aliens comics.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if my memory is correct, he had like Aliens Colonial Marines #1, and I think there might have been something like Aliens Hive and Alien vs. Predator. That blew my mind. That was the first I ever got a whiff of it, but that drove me into the comic book shop in my hometown, and from there, I was always reading the Alien and Predator comics, but I also started diving into, the comic book medium in general.
Coming around for a 709er.
Terminal guidance locked in.
Where's the damn beacon? Oh, I see it.
So your first film was Aliens, right?
Right.
Like every one of us. I feel like
so
that's like
a lot of us out there.
Yeah, and our parents introduce it to us, like many of us,
Yep.
which I think is such a great common memory to share with so many people in fandom. Like we all have those moments of our parents saying, "Hey, let's watch this," you know. So Aliens is your first film. Alien
Right.
is your second. And then how old were you when Alien 3 released?
I want to say that I don't know the specific age, but I think I was in fifth or sixth grade. It was shortly after, it wasn't like much longer after I had discovered the franchise, but somehow, I don't know how this happened. I missed it in theaters. And,
Me too.
but did you miss out on it as well?
Yeah, and I was 16 at the time, and I was being raised very strictly Christian. So they're like, "You can't see that movie."
Sure. Yeah. Not the most kosher movie in the world, but obviously I caught up with it. I remember Alien 3 was really specific for me because both the Dark Horse comic came out at a specific time and was my first actual comic book I owned, and also I remember, I want to say that the VHS or rental for Alien 3 got released around the holiday season, whether it was November or December.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, because I have a distinct memory of that one. Of my mother had put the fake sort of electronic candles in the windows, and she had these orange bulbs, and it added this real terror after the movie, because I remember walking through the hallways, which were usually white, but in the dark with the candle, the false candlelight, it very much looked like the sets of Alien 3, where they're setting those candles down
Keep
there.
blowing out them candles. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember it was definitely like playing. The shadows were playing with my mind as I was going to bed after watching that one. But yeah, I loved Alien 3. I grew up not really even knowing that people had an issue with it. I sort of hit that later, I think, as I started getting into my teenage years, that some people don't like Alien 3. But definitely it was just another chapter in the series to me.
I had a terrible dream in hypersleep, and I had to be sure what killed her. Anyway, I made a mistake.
Possibly.
And now I've made another mistake.
Really? What's that?
Fraternizing with a prisoner. Physical contact. It's against the rules, isn't it?
Definitely.
So I take it you did see Alien Resurrection in theaters.
I did.
Okay.
I did. I did have to have my father take me to see that. I think he was bored out of his mind, but I remember I think I was probably right under 17. I was probably like 15 or 16 and had to talk my dad into taking me.
Yeah. We'll move on to the prequels in a minute, but in terms of the OT, the original, I'll say original trilogy, because I don't feel like Resurrection's a part of that trilogy. It's certainly Ripley, but it's not the same Ripley, so it's 200 years later.
Different
So
character,
do you have a favorite, or do you see the films as one story, or how does that work for you?
That's tough. I think Aliens is my favorite, but honestly, for me, the first three are so solid that I consider them just really one of the most complete, perfect trilogies out there. I don't really have any problems that major problems, I would say, with any of those films. I think thematically they work amazing. As much as a disaster behind the scenes as Alien 3 was, to me it's thematically such a perfect ending for the character, and sort of follows the tone of the universe established in the other two. And while I don't think it's of the same quality, I would even argue that those first original four films are way beyond what you get from a standard sci-fi franchise.
Absolutely.
Even the fourth film is trying to do really bold new things, and they gave it to another really visually stunning, young director, and so I do have a respect for all four of those films, just because no one said, "Hey, let's just do what we did last time." Yeah, but a little different. There is an effort, even if they failed at certain times, to do something different and groundbreaking, I feel like, each time in those first four films.
I agree. I would agree. And I know that we've had some discussion about Resurrection, and you talked about great ideas in the script. And I completely agree. I think that there are some interesting elements to Resurrection. Absolutely. I think like everything, it's implementation. It's maybe something was lost in translation in terms of
Sure.
script to screen, or the wrong actors were chosen, or maybe there was some of the right elements but not the right writer or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think I would, like Jean-Pierre Jeunet, obviously, but for other people who don't, by chance, directed Alien 3. He's directed Amelie. He's directed Delicatessen, City of Lost Children, A Very Long Engagement. So many great French films, or films in general that have rich imagery, beautiful. They're really kind of heartfelt stories.
Right.
And he's a very specific kind of filmmaker. And he can really create an image unlike anyone else. So he's no doubt he's talented. It was just an odd mix.
Yeah, definitely. There's a weirdness because there's some feelings. There's feelings about that film where it feels very comic booky at times, which I enjoy, but it also borderlines on sort of this like I don't even know, so stylized to a point that I wouldn't say parody, but it's almost winking at you at times, that movie. And I feel like that is a little bit from, it could be from a lot of elements, but it does seem like the director himself has sort of this tone with his films where they're fluid, and that is such a different thing than what we've had with the previous Alien films prior to that. The first three are very grounded and very realistic in their own way. And this fourth one's a little like, well, let's see how we can we push these borders. And, obviously it didn't work for a lot of people because of that, I think.
Well, you gonna kill me or what?
I've said this many times on our shows, but I saw the film 7 times in the theater, and it wasn't really until 2 or 3 years later, after kind of the hype of the excitement, my first legit Alien film in theaters as a kid, that I realized, it wasn't that great, and I had posters and things, because I was working at a movie theater at the time.
Sure.
I had posters up in my room and all sorts of things. And then I had written a script featuring Call and Ripley that I thought was interesting. But yeah, it took me a while to kind of look at it again and go, oh, all right, this probably wasn't that successful.
Did you ever, there was a really bizarre comic series they did called Alien vs. Predator vs. Terminator that also continued the story of Ripley 8 and Call?
No, I never.
It's like one of
God.
the hardest comics to find. But I have one issue of it, and it's really bizarre. It's this thing where the Terminator is still trying to fulfill, its mission of wiping humans out, and somehow gets tied up into the future with like combining alien DNA. It's bizarre. I can't even explain it correctly, but there is, the one thing I would argue is I think that there's something fun sometimes about returning to those two characters. I guess that's the one thing that when I think about Alien Resurrections, I'm just like, even we could have suffered that film. I feel like they could have done maybe pulled the ship or righted the ship if there was another chance to go back to those characters, because it's almost like there's this weirdness of like this half human, half alien that shouldn't really exist, and this android who was created by androids sort of being the most humane people in the galaxy, even more so than the humans that they're around. And so I do think like if a different director or a different voice had gotten in there and been able to continue the story, maybe there would have been something to mine. It's just I think it might be too far gone at this point.
Yeah, totally. You should. I don't know if there's any images of cells of that comic, but you have got to take some photos and upload them.
Definitely.
I've got to see that. That's crazy.
I'll post some stuff in the Building Better World.
Awesome.
For you guys.
So I remember where I was when Prometheus was announced. Of course, they didn't use the name. They just said Ridley Scott is coming back to the science fiction, and they were kind of throwing, is it Alien, is it not? There was talk about Carl Rinch, I think he was dating his daughter at the time, that Carl Rinch would be directing and Scott would be producing. And I just remember freaking out. Oh my God, Ridley Scott, the father of science fiction, really. The two best science fiction films ever made, arguably, maybe, or maybe
Yeah.
one of them at least, Blade Runner, then maybe Kubrick's 2001. Where were you when that was? Do you remember kind of where you were and what was going through your head when that was announced?
I don't remember if I hesitate to say that I remember the announcement. I think that I had been so like teased about like, and I mean teased by the studios, not by anyone in particular, but teased by these like, oh, maybe these alien things are going to happen. And I had sort of been really burned by AVP and those two films. So I think that I was kind of like, well, I was almost like, I guess, unwilling to believe a lot of stuff. But when I do remember seeing the first trailer and just being blown away, like just the lead up to Prometheus was fantastic. The trailers were phenomenal. The little like promo materials they released, like the TED Talk and some of the David focused videos and the crew talking, all that stuff was like phenomenal. I remember just eating it up and being like, I can't believe how much it feels like the 1970 film, but legitimately like with more money or technology in it. We were with a trucker crew in that film. This is the state-of-the-art, best that money can buy research facility or vessel, and I just was so excited,
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll never forget seeing the first trailer and that famous siren that I could listen to over and over and over, kind of heralding, we've returned to Alien. And how excited I was for that film. And I saw the film twice in the theater, perhaps 3 times. Once was in 3D, which didn't really add anything to it. But what was your reaction?
Well, I did see it in 3D as well. There were some parts that I actually did like in 3D, but I remember coming out of the film, I'd seen it with my wife and another friend of mine who has worked on several comics with me, and I think I was still trying to grapple with it after the movie. They were a little more harsh on like some of the attitudes or the actions that some of the scientific based characters had taken, and just logical gaps in some of the character choices. I gotta say, like, I mean, I cannot put down anyone's opinion who really loved the film. I think it's a beautiful film. There is a lot to like. I own it. I watch it occasionally.
Yeah.
But
I watched it last night myself.
I'm very much like that too. But it reminds me of the way that I feel like I have to deal with a lot of franchises that I love going forward. And it feels like when we return to these franchises, whether it be Star Wars, whether it be the Jurassic Park franchise, whatever, I don't know I don't know if I'm more picky or if the care isn't applied in the same way that I feel like it was originally. But I feel like there is a haphazardness to making things connect in a logical way. And for me, I guess I might just be a continuity sort of like fiend. But I feel like when you approach one of these projects, the first thing you have to do is like look at where does it have to link up, and then make that work, And Prometheus has been a slow disappointment for me because of that, because I can enjoy a lot of things about it, but I continue to, like, the more I watch it, the more I go, oh, this kind of doesn't fit what happened previously or what was established previously. And maybe, Scott hasn't finished his story, obviously, and maybe he would have gotten there, but there are some weird choices, or some choices that have left me a little bit in the cold,
Totally. Yeah, I hear you. I'll echo most of what you said. I think that there's some brilliant things. I love the engineers. I love the aesthetic decisions. I love that they kind of retreated a little bit from Geiger. They kept sort of his architecture, but it wasn't quite as more mechanical than it was bio. I thought it was great. Again, unfortunately, the story was lacking. But you hit on a certain point that I'd like to discuss as we move to kind of the big hot ticket item, which is Alien Covenant. I also feel like as these franchises are re-engaged today, there is this need to kind of reconnect them, and I can understand that. I don't even mind a connection if they can do it well. If they can do it But I just don't mean like, oh, hey, so for instance, it would be, say, in whatever Alien movie they released, and someone mentions the name Ripley, and some of the events that are happening are within the same timeline as the events in Alien or whatever, Alien 3.
Sure.
That's one thing. What I really have a trouble with is, for instance, with the original trilogy, yes, there might be some issues with Alien 3 in terms of some of the effects and the compositing. But largely it's a triumph of a film. Most of the people who don't like it just don't like what they did with the characters from Aliens. What I have a problem with, I think these days, as these new entries are made into these films that were started in the late 70s or the 80s, is number one, they aren't as good. And I feel like we're being made to settle in some ways. And so we're taking it like, oh, okay, well, this was great, or this part was good, as opposed to, well, that's never how it was. These films were amazing originally, and now they're not. But we're settling for them, and we're like, oh, we're trying to find something good in it. Oh, this was good in it, and that was good in it. But for me, that's not how I view films. I either like it or I don't. Certainly, like with Covenant, there's parts of Covenant that I really love, and I watch the first 45 minutes, hour, no problem. I'm kind of rambling on a bit because I have a larger point that I'm trying to make, and I feel like essentially we're settling. I think as audiences, we're settling. We're settling for these mass-produced re-engagements into old trilogies or films that were made 30-odd years ago, and they're not as good, and they're not as well made, and the continuity isn't as well thought of or figured out, and a lot of people are kind of settling for them, and I think it's harming the brand, and that's my problem with both Prometheus and Alien Covenant.
I could see that. I don't know that I don't know that I entirely agree that we're settling. You know, I do think that there is not totally a monolithic voice out there. Like, I mean, Last Jedi and Force Awakens to a degree, both would be examples of that, where I feel like, you know, it's not 100% like, oh, everyone just loves this film. I mean, certain films like Alien, Jurassic Park, Jaws, things, there's general films that almost everyone agrees universally, you know, that's a great film. It's going to be a classic, or it is already. It's what is really difficult to decipher is like I guess the question that you're asking to a degree is like are we settling? Are the films is our opinion of the film without outside influence? You know, I guess that's what I'm constantly asking myself in order to not go completely negative on things that are just new or challenge my pre-established understanding of a story or a certain franchise. You know, I think everyone could do a little bit to walk that line and kind of make sure that they're keeping themselves open-minded. But that said, I think you have many valid points. I mean, there are things, you know, to focus on things like Prometheus and Alien Covenant. There are things here that are divisive. There are choices here that you can argue Ridley Scott's making bold choices. He's telling a story he wants to tell, and while I'm disappointed with the story. Some people are getting, you know, much more out of it. Now, maybe where I guess where I can go, like, I don't know if I would call it settling, is there seems to be a degree to what each one of us as a fan can accept in regards to like excusing or sort of wiping away the disbelief, you know. Every film has a little bit of that. You know, like Jurassic Park is so great that by the end of the film, you don't question that the T-Rex sneaks into the end and saves everyone from a velociraptor. You don't go like, well, wait, how did he get in there? That he would have made a huge noise. You're so into the film, and the film is paid off in so many other ways that you're willing to accept that. And
totally, yeah.
I think, you know, for us, you know, us personally, us too, when it comes to Alien Covenant and Prometheus, I think we have all reached our limit. The film has done enough things repeatedly that it makes us hard to accept the things that it does right. That it outweighs it. And I feel like there are fans out there that I don't know that they're settling, but what they're able to do is they got enough out of the story being told that they were able to kind of look past some of those flaws or failures that we see. I guess that's what I would say. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. In fact, I think actually you're using a better term than I should. I think settling is a little bit of an unfair term. I should say accepting. And I think what I'm trying to say, or what I feel when I engage films, is much like, if a film is great, we'll look past certain things. If by the end of it we're like, holy shit, that was awesome. Now maybe this didn't make sense, and maybe when we go back and we'll watch it again, and we're like, oh yeah, that's kind of weird. Like, for instance, I love The Last Jedi. I love it. It feels like Star Wars to me. Now, there are parts of The Last Jedi that I think it's ridiculous, like when Poe calls into the Juggernaut, whatever that thing is, the Dreadnought or whatever, and and they're like, and he's kind of on hold.
Ball,
it's
right?
it's total breaking fourth wall. It feels like it just feels like Earth, a conversation you'd hear on Earth, not a conversation you'd hear between the Resistance and the Empire or whatever they're called.
Right. First Order.
But yeah, I mean, and I forgot. And I totally validate that, but I was in love enough with the story and the journey that I was on with the characters that I've loved, Rey including, that I could bypass that and watch it again because it's smaller. But I think with the Alien prequels, and we can kind of move into Covenant a little bit before, with the Alien prequels, there's more that I can't accept as opposed to more that I can. And what I can't accept outweighs, what I can. And I like, for instance, with Prometheus, like I hadn't seen Prometheus in probably at least a year or two, perhaps. Okay. And so I put it in last night, excited actually, like, wow, I'm going to watch Prometheus. It's been a while.
Sure, yeah.
And I was playing it, and I love the opening, and even some of the couple things in the beginning and the crew, and this is great. And then I'm just like watching it, and I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. Wow, this dialogue is awful. Wow, this acting is bad in these spots. Wow, this doesn't make sense. Wow, this, and by the end of it, I was texting some of the Perfect Organism people, and I was like, well, the dialogue is still shit. And most of them were like, yep. And it's sad. It's hard to kind of, it's difficult to be in a position where you really want to love something and you can't.
Sure.
And some people can force themselves to. I'm not that type of a person. So I suppose I want to be in a position, and I think we all do, where we want to be able to have such a dynamic enough story and dynamic enough characters where we can accept the flaws. And I don't think Alien is in that place right now. Go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is what I think the deal, like, I have much less patience for some, like, say, like, I'm part of the Star Wars fandom. I have a lot of less patience for people that are anti, like, these new movies, just borderline, like, we don't like any of them, and like how vicious it's become. One thing that I will at least grant to the Alien fandom is we're in this sort of somewhat semi-unique situation where we don't have any additional films out there beyond there's not, like, with almost every other franchise, they're doing more than just the main through line of films, like when we're looking at Marvel or DC or Star Wars or even Star Trek, which branches off into TV and stuff, there are options essentially. If you don't like the Star Wars here, you can go over and maybe you'll like the Star Wars over here. With the Alien franchise, I think one of the things that we really struggle with is this, I don't know if it's confirmed, but it seems to be pretty prevalent that Ridley Scott has kind of said, like, hey, I'm telling this story and I don't want anyone else telling other stories at the same time. I don't want anyone playing in the sandbox. And that is somewhat unfortunate, given that this is not that they need to explode it, but this is totally a franchise that could be some kind of cinematic universe. There
Yes.
could be multiple stories. There could be standalone stories.
Yeah.
There could be different timelines. You know, we have films bouncing around 50 years to 200 years. You know, like I mean, there's a lot to play with here, and none of it's being played with. And none of it's being played with except these Scott films, and they're doing something that is always going to be a risk, which is I don't even know if I would call it retconning, but they're definitely like messing with the DNA of the universe. They're playing with the origin of the xenomorph. They're rewriting stuff about the engineers to a degree, or what we thought of the engineers, you know, given the findings in the first film. So
Yeah.
that's bold stuff. It's impressive in one way to be like, well, they're trying something new, but it's also like, well, you're also messing with the heart of this whole thing, you know?
Yeah, it's a
And
danger
that's
zone.
tough.
It's
Mhm.
iconic set pieces essentially within fandom or within the universe of Alien, where, you know, that moment when Kane sees the jockey, we're all like, what is that? And that should have been enough. And it's a bold move on Scott's part to say, well, let's talk about that. What is that thing? Let's explore it. Let's create it. And that's a divisive thing to do. You're either going to succeed or you're not.
Right.
I love the engineer aesthetic. I do. I think it's iconic and terrifying and beautiful, but I don't know if it should be the jockey. I love them for what they are. But, you know, I suppose it is what it is. I don't know if definitively know for sure if it is the jockey.
Yeah, right. That's true.
I think that might just be us hoping against hope that it's something else in that chair that's the appropriate size.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I think you're right. I think we are just hoping against hope, because I do think like those are some of the small details that I think, as you see what Scott wants to tell, he's sort of bored by the xenomorph, as many people have pointed out, and he's said himself, and he's very interested in this AI David aspect. But it is sad to some degree, because, well, there's plenty of stories that could be being told that don't have to mess with the origin of the xenomorph, but still exist in this universe, you know?
Completely, absolutely. So let's move on to Covenant. So I would take it that your experience of Prometheus wasn't I hate casting things as negative and positive.
No, it was a disappointed one.
One. Okay.
So I was less excited for Covenant, but I tried to not be completely down on it. I followed, as usual, I followed the lead up. I was very impressed with the backburster scene when that kind of debuted, and so there was part of me that was somewhat excited for it. There were parts where I felt like I wasn't crazy about The Last Supper, I think it was called.
Yes, yeah.
Just because it felt a little derivative of Alien without a real point. Just kind of like, hey, we're doing Alien stuff, and I was like, okay, well, let's see what the movie is like. The movie, I actually I had a pretty pleasant experience in the theater, because I had low expectations. I enjoyed a lot of the film, and it went a little wonky at the end for me, but yeah, it is it's kind of still like Prometheus, where I rewatch it. I have it on DVD. I will rewatch it. I still enjoy a lot about it, but there's enough things that don't make sense to me that still kind of poke in my side, that I'm like, it's at best like a 50-50 film for me. And we have some of the similar issues where David is still fascinating. I think the neomorphs are awesome. A lot of the David's workshop is super fascinating, and sort of that creepiness. But the crew makes a lot of weird choices, and there's I think it's Aron, the character, who just has no fear of David, even though he should fear him, and then sticks his head in a egg. It's just, there's some stuff there where I'm like, I don't know how to explain this, and that can be frustrating.
Totally. Yeah. It is a mixed bag. And to an earlier point that I was making, I think I'm not used to this kind of an experience in an Alien film. Alien Resurrection aside, because I think we can kind of write that entire film off, so it's easier.
Sure.
You know,
Mhm.
there's a couple of great things, and there's some great moments and great ideas in Alien Resurrection that we've discussed. But in general, the film just doesn't work, and most people agree. But with the original three, much like you and many of us, they're essentially flawless. And I don't mean flawless like you can't find mistakes in them. I just think in terms of the experience of the films and Ripley's arc and
Yeah.
the ending of her story. It's absolutely beautiful. And the prequels are frustrating for me because it's not an even experience, and I don't experience movies that way. I don't experience movies where I'm like, oh well, yeah, this was great, but I just it's frustrating for me to even kind of talk about. I would rather not talk about it. Not because I'm afraid to talk about it, just then it gets kind of into a divisive territory where then you're talking about things that maybe someone loves, but you don't want it's not personal. But then at the same time, in fandom, as you very well experience, there's a sense of ownership that we have to these properties. Even though they're not our intellectual properties, we've grown up with them. They've been by our side. We have maybe some figures. The films are on repeat. We're always talking about it. We're always experiencing them. So we own a part of this. And we have some financial stake in it as well. I mean, we've paid for these films. We buy them on DVD. We buy the licensed figures. There is financial stake in it as well. So we are almost like shareholders. Not to say that you need to do everything as shareholders, because oftentimes shareholders are wrong or they don't know.
Yeah.
But it makes it a little bit personal when something you love comes up and they release another entry into it and it's just not up to par. And you really, and I know for myself, I have to like step back and realize, okay, Jamie, this isn't personal. This is just a film. But for me, I experience films very emotionally. I relate most of the films that I love. I relate to on an emotional, psychological level. That's what I do with Alien. Alien for me isn't about the Xenos, even though they're cool, or the guns, or the kicking ass with the Marines. In terms of Alien Covenant,
yes.
What's your kind of debrief on that internally for yourself?
Well, I like a lot of Alien Covenant, and I do like to hear people. I'm a fan who I like to hear what people liked about a film to at least kind of get an idea of maybe a way that maybe I have been misinterpreting or looking the wrong way at something, or maybe need to look at it a different way to enjoy it. Covenant, there's a lot that I do really enjoy about it. I would say the thing that you were kind of expressing earlier about being sort of frustrated by the unevenness, it kind of comes from Ridley Scott, because he is a talented storyteller. He helped define the sci-fi and the space genre, throughout the 70s and 80s, and has him returning to it. He, even if I say he's lost a little bit here and there, he still is incredibly talented. And there are scenes in both Prometheus and Alien Covenant that I would say are, so powerful that they were worth, to a degree, having whatever film contain them released. So while I'm not crazy about the idea going forward of continuing the direction that we're heading, because I do feel I feel a little cold about I don't know what we're learning by setting up essentially fairly nice or innocent characters to kind of be knocked off by David as sort of revenge for being created. I don't know how far we need to go with that unless something new is introduced. But I would love if if there was another film to at least allow him to wrap up his story and maybe get some actual specifics. They don't need to be laid out in a boring fashion, but some specifics about what is being said here. We're still in this weird place of did David create the alien, or did David find a design that previously existed and then create an alien? What is his ultimate plan? With these individuals that he has. We have this hint about the Queen Alien. Is that going to happen? So I mean, if they don't do that, I would say that my debriefing would be they got to kind of like wipe the deck. You know, I know we're changing hands right now with Fox sort of going away, I guess, and the assets passing on to Disney. So as much as I would hate it to a certain degree because it would be divisive again, there's another part of me that goes, hey, maybe they need to do exactly what they did with Star Wars, and they need to get a group of passionate individuals that are going to be a story group or like a team that's completely focused on where the Alien franchise goes from here. And they decide, hey, these things are canon, these aren't, and this is where we're going from, you know? So
yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. And I have faith that Disney, I mean, well, it's a weird thing because I love what actually Disney has done with Star Wars. I didn't like Solo. Solo's really the only Star Wars film that they've made that I didn't enjoy it at all the first time. The second time I was a little bit better. But aside from that, Rogue One is one of my all-time favorite Star Wars films. I loved The Force Awakens despite its derivative quality. There was enough there that was new that I could accept it being so derived. And then again with The Last Jedi, I thought was just phenomenal. And I think that Disney has some really good instincts. I mean, Marvel, of course, is owned by Disney, and they have a really good system of creating really great films. Film after film after film has great integrity, great writing, great casting. I mean, Marvel is just right on point. And so I'm comfortable with Alien being in the hands, at least if Fox remains or I should say Disney remains a parent of Fox. I think that Disney could step in and really say, hey, we want to invest in this. We want this to be successful, and this is how we can see a way forward. And whether it's putting in someone like a Kathleen Kennedy, who's a director or who's a part of a story group, I think Disney has the right instincts. And I'm not afraid. I mean, they've released hard R's films under many different production companies.
They'll find another production company, and the big thing I hope that they do, because the story group has done this very well with Star Wars and with MCU has done this well, is if you have these resources of like these extended universe of comics or video games or books, you know, mine that stuff. You don't have to tell the exact same stories you know, to like page to page, but find the elements that you want there and bring them into the cinematic world. You know, the Star Wars films have been great because they've been willing to go back, even though they've wiped a lot of the EU away for that fandom. They've pulled things like Grand Admiral Thrawn and you know, this idea of Han Solo and Princess Leia having a son who goes to the dark side. A lot of this stuff was originally imagined, you know, in comics and books, things like that. And the Alien mythos is huge when you bring in the Dark Horse comics and the video games and the novels and everything else, you know?
Totally. I am 100% on board. I think that there's a lot there. There's many different stories. I don't think the story of Alien is over by any means. And I think when you're exploring kind of the deepest parts of what terrify us psychologically, terrify us in a physical space, terrify us in terms of body horror and body kind of dysmorphia or all of those things. There's just so much there that I think that a really good story committee could say, hey, no, this is the story that we're going to tell. And you can step away from Ripley. You can step away from David in the prequels. And to that point you made, I think that you're right. I think really there doesn't seem to be a point to, okay, so you're leading up into Alien. Why? Like, what more do we need to see? What is important enough that these films need to be told? What is there that we don't know?
My fear is that David planned everything.
Yeah,
You know, that David sent the Nostromo to LV-426 or put Ash on board or something, and I just hope that's not the case.
Yeah, me neither. But this is kind of a segue. I want to get back to Alien right at the end, just to kind of ask you what your hopes are for the future. But before we do that, I wanna talk about Fanbase Press and kind of
Yes.
tell me what you guys are about.
Well, we say that we are about celebrating fandoms and creating new ones. We're sort of a unique entity to some degree in geekdom. We are first and foremost, we are an independent comic book publisher. We've released about 8 titles at this point, mostly comics and graphic novels. We've dabbled a little bit into things like horror poetry. We do have a geeky cross-stitch book coming out later this year. We've been working on an audio drama as well. But the other side to the company, the celebrating fandoms part of the company, is really a geek culture website where we foster a geeky community where, much like we were talking about previously, everyone is welcome. All fandoms are welcome. It's a positive place to celebrate being geeky or passionate about these things, and we do that by offering daily reviews of comics, movies, books, things like that. We do interviews with creators of all statuses, from small indie creators who are just starting on maybe their first comic or their first film to celebrities that you would know the names of instantaneously. We also have a podcast network that has 4 podcasts that focus on various avenues of pop culture and discussion. And we do a lot of event appearances. We go out to conventions, and we have a presence on con floors. We also host panels and produce content for those conventions that usually examines pop culture or indie creating. And we'll also go just cover events that we're not exhibiting at. So we might go to something like say Star Wars Celebration, or maybe a red carpet event at the Paley Center that's honoring something new and breaking in TV. But events like those we'll go and cover and get interviews and photos and write up event coverage so that those who can't make it can check it out as well.
In relation to what you guys do, it's essentially multimedia. I mean, you're doing comics, you have a podcast network, and you have a physical presence as well. How do you, as a company, how do you embrace kind of the state of fandom? And fandom has always had, I wouldn't call it a leg of toxicity. There's always, and
Sure.
I like to stay away from hot button words like haters or whatever, because I
Sure,
think
yeah.
if someone disagrees with you, it doesn't mean that they're a hater. And that term gets thrown out a lot, all the time. You'll post something and someone will say, well, I don't like it. And right away you're a hater.
Yeah,
And
sure.
you hear that in fandom all the time. And I find that a term offensive, to be honest with you. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I don't like you or your opinion. It just means I disagree with you. It's not personal. But I would say the horizon, or the sea is another word I'm looking for, of fandom right now, is the most toxic I've seen it in a long time.
Sure.
In fact, Perfect Organism has really been trying to work towards unity, work towards the idea that we can host all opinions, and that everyone's opinions matter, and it's not personal, and that we're here to have fun, and we're here to build community and give back. That's why we're here as Perfect Organism. And I'm curious, how do you guys kind of navigate what's going on in fandom, especially as you see in Star Wars, even in the alien fandom, there's some major toxicity going on as well.
Well, I definitely will dive into that. Before I do, I want to say, thank you to everyone at Perfect Organism for really, attempting to do this, because I think that's one of the biggest things that does need to happen is, if you love a certain fandom, you need to, realize that there is a toxicity out there, and you can be a positive element by making sure that you speak out against toxicity, and that you don't become toxic in yourself in order to fight toxicity, which is always a danger. But I listen to the podcast. I'm on, as you said, Building Better Worlds, and I find this to be a very welcoming community. I don't feel like there's any support or tolerance of aggressive or derogatory behavior. And even when you speak on the podcast, any of you, about your opinions, I never feel that anyone on the podcast is unwilling to hear someone else's opinion or dismisses it without cause, or even with cause. I feel like you guys are not dismissive of each other's opinions. You might disagree, but you don't invalidate each other, and you speak to it. And I think fandom itself needs that example. To our end, Fanbase Press is trying to do the same thing by providing that kind of example. The way that we look at it is, there are certain things that sometimes you do have to make bigger changes. We originally started out 8 years ago as Fanboy Comics, and there was a period around 2015 where we decided to rebrand to Fanbase Press, and part of that was because not only was Fanboy itself being turned into it was getting a derogatory feeling around it or meaning. There were also certain things that I, as a fellow creator and as someone who was co-founder of Fanbase Press, was having my eyes open to. We had a lot of female staff members and contributors, and there were times that they felt that they were less a part of Fanboy Comics because it was Fanboy Comics. I thought it was a very inclusionary thing, that it wasn't completely gendered, but I was looking through my own point of view, and there were many other reasons we dropped the comics point as well as we move forward. But I think just like elements like that are important. Taking stock of things that you maybe are not considering as you go forward, and just reevaluating, like, hey, am I seeing this only through my point of view? For Fanbase Press, the way that we really approach everything is we obviously do reviews, we talk on the podcast and are critical, but we don't see fandom as a toxic place. We don't tolerate any kind of racism or sexism. But if you have a differing opinion, that of course is allowed. And the way that we sort of speak to our contributors about it, whether they're doing reviews or examining fandom, writing about fandom itself, we're looking to be a positive voice. It doesn't mean you can never be critical, but there's a difference between a review that has, say, constructive criticism in it versus many reviews that you find online where it almost feels like they're trying to get points for being the wittiest, comment or the biggest slam on the project or whatever it might be. I think it's just having that respect that no matter what, someone was creating these things and they weren't trying to do a bad job. They wanted to make it work, whether their idea aligned with you or not. We as fans have to be understanding of that.
Absolutely. I think that there's certainly, aside from an element of toxicity, there's also a large element of a takedown culture. So it's not only, I don't like this, it's not good, I want to destroy it. Right. And that is worse, I think, than the elements of toxicity. And much like you, we move away from all that. It's not anything that we want to be a part of. But we also feel like we need to address it. We need to address.
Sure. Yeah.
We need to address it and kind of keep fandom accountable. I feel like as for us as Perfect Organism, and we also, Perfect Organism hosts 2 podcasts. The other is Shoulder of Orion, the Blade Runner podcast. Mm-hmm. I feel like we have a responsibility to kind of be an example that you can be inclusive and you can have differing opinions and still be friends and still be a part of a community. And it's really, really important. And in reference to our political climate as a country, the USA, where you and I are based, I think it's really important to make a stand for being inclusive, being kind, and unification. I think those are really they're simple ideas, but right now they're revolutionary ideas.
Well, and you know what, Jamie, that I would really push for too, that I think you guys are probably on board for, is the big thing that I don't see happening in pop culture a lot, that I think when it does happen is fantastic, is that if we want these stories to matter as much as they do to like people like us who are so passionate that we have to create something like a podcast or you know, something, a website or something to express our fandom, it means that we not just in these characters and like these stories, but we believe in the values that they're being represented there. I mean, Alien is, you know, the franchise is not a story that is just like about shooting creatures, you know, or being killed by a creature. There are, like, when you look at the character of Ripley or any of the characters that we embrace from these movies, there are definitive values of like taking care of those who are weaker, you know, being a good person just because it's the right thing to do, doing the right thing, you know. Like, there are even more, I would say, detailed, you know, themes to get into, like the corporatization aspects of the Alien franchise. But there is just a legitimate, like, hey, like, if we all love the character of Ellen Ripley, wouldn't we want to like kind of act the way that we see her acting to other people?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Let me, in terms of fan base press, you use the term we. Can you talk about the setup of it? Like, who is we? And as you answer, I'm also curious, you've talked about releasing comic books, doing an audio drama. Do you guys have an income? How does that, what's the inner workings like?
Well, we most of us at the company. I guess I'll start there. Like, the company is co-founded by myself and my wife. She also operates as our editor-in-chief. So basically, any review or published piece on the website is going through her for editorial review and direction. We do also have an editorials manager that works closely with Barbara, who is my wife. The editorials manager is Michelle Brittany, and she manages the majority of our editorial content. We do a lot of editorials on either current occurrences in pop culture, whether it be like, say, the release of the latest Game of Thrones season, or a movie that's coming up, or say it's, you know, a 10th or 20th or 30th anniversary of some sort of beloved property. Michelle Brittany handles the majority of that, and also helps us with coverage at events like San Diego Comic-Con, which we were just at. From there down, we have a number of contributors that are around the world. They all volunteer their time. If we get a opportunity to review or cover something, it's usually extended to these individuals, and someone will either volunteer for it or be assigned to it, and they complete the work and bring it back for us to add to the website or wherever it may go, whether it's an article or podcast, whatever it may be. In regards to how it works on a financial end, we are very open that we all have, for the most part, day jobs. This is something that we do out of sort of a creative need and totally. A love, you know, for it. We do go to conventions, and we do sell our comics online. So it's not something where we aren't bringing in anything, because we are definitely selling these comics and other merchandise associated with them. But it's something where everything is creator owned, and we are splitting it with those creators behind each project. Most projects have a different creative team for each one. So, you know, it's not something where it's like we are at the point where we're like, okay, well, we can totally put the 100% focus on the publishing company right now. But every year, Fanbase Press does continue to grow, and we continue to be more and more involved with it.
That's awesome. And what would you say is the biggest thing you're working on right now?
I would say probably the biggest thing so far would be we just released a book called Kinsey. That is it's a young adult graphic novel. It's written by Kit Steinkellner and illustrated by her sister, Emma Steinkellner. It was created by Sebastian Kalechik, who is a comic creator who also worked on another title we did called Penguins vs. Possums. But Kinsey is all about a little girl named Lupe who gets superpowers during her quinceanera, but she only has them for 1 year. And it was released digitally as 15 issues. We released each issue on the 15th of the month to stick with the Kinsey theme, and then we recently put out the physical copy, and we were lucky enough, it was nominated for an Eisner Award, which is essentially the Oscar of comics.
That is awesome. Congratulations on that.
Thank you. And it was super fun. We got to go to the award ceremony and rub elbows with our comic book peers, and it was super fun. We didn't bring the award home, but Kinsey is just like a fantastic book. It's super inclusive. It speaks to a lot of great themes on mental health and body image positivity, and also has just obviously, from the title and the content is really speaks to the Latina heritage. If you like superhero stories, or if you like things like, I guess the closest thing I could think would be something like Tone of Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something like that. It's very much in that vein. But I would also say there's plenty of horror comics that we did when we were first starting out that if your readers are listening and they're, I would assume, Alien fans like myself, I would definitely say check out some of our books like Identity Thief or Something Animal, which lean more into the darker content edge. Will do.
So where do people go if they want to get more involved and they want to know more about Fanbase Press?
Sure. Well, fanbasepress.com is our website. We've got new content there every day. That would be the main gateway. You can find us, though, on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and all our podcasts are on iTunes. So definitely check us out, any of those places.
Fantastic. Before I ask you this last couple of questions,
Sure.
I just want to thank you again for coming on. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Patrick and I, Patrick says hello, by the way, are the main, he's doing a bunch of stuff today. I have noticed you. I've obviously noticed Fanbase Press. I know we've shared some stuff that you guys have done.
Yes, thank you so much for doing
absolutely. And I think it's important for me, not just me, myself, but just being a part of not just the Alien fan base, but fandom in general, to give each other a shout out, share a page.
Sure.
Like, I feel like that doesn't happen a lot. I feel like sometimes you have these big, huge outlets like, I'll just name a couple of names, Bloody Disgusting, Den of Geek, who are awesome, but they don't really talk about community. They don't really share. There's not a lot of community with the larger outlets. So I feel like as someone who's a part of the community, as a podcast or series of podcasts that are speaking into fandom or delivering content into fandom, let's be here for each other. And it sounds kind of hippie, love and peace, but I really mean it. Like, I am only, or we are only as good as a podcast, dependent on how much we're kind of helping everyone else. So I really feel like the way forward is our success is their success, and and vice versa. So that's something that Patrick and I have noticed with Fanbase Press, is that you guys have really kind of have been out there and doing good things. So last couple of questions. Where do you want to see the Alien series go? Do you have hopes and dreams?
I do have hopes and dreams. I probably have annoyingly posted it multiple times on Building Better Words, but I wrote a article for Alien Day this year that was all about the cinematic universe that Alien fans deserve. And I do really believe that the best thing that could happen for the Alien series would be to kind of stop these tendrils that they're doing and bring the Alien and the Predator world and I guess Prometheus world, if you wish, together, under a shared vision, a shared voice, and follow some of the things that we've seen from like the MCU and Star Wars. Allow them. They're never going to be exactly like that, and I not to confuse people, make them think like, oh, I'm saying that they can do 4 films a year or something like that. I do not think that's possible. The Alien franchise can only shift so much before it would become just somewhat unrecognizable. But there, when you look at the comics and stuff, there are ways to tell a horror story. There are ways to tell an action story. There are ways to tell something that is really weird on the edge versus something that is very reminiscent of what's come before. So I would love to see them restart that process, and I would also love to get a decent, and I hate to say this because I'm sure there's people that love those films, but I would love to have a Alien vs. Predator film that honors the original comic that was produced. I feel like the Alien vs. Predator is something that if you don't know the original comic, you very much can think of it as nothing more than like a Freddy versus Jason type of monster, like slam the action figures together kind of thing. I mean, even James Cameron and Sigourney Weaver and a few others feel that way themselves. But I do think that there's a way to tell that story in a way that honors both film franchises and is serious and is impactful and what fans deserve.
I can respect that. I am not a Predator fan. I don't think Predator is bad. I'm just Alien series is just, it engages me emotionally, psychologically, and on all regards. And Predator for me my experience, it just tends to be, oh, let's kill it, or it's gonna kill it, But
Sure,
I have seen, I've been exposed to the comics, and I've heard from really good friends along the saying very similar things that you are. That there's a worthy story there if they were to take it seriously. So that would be interesting.
Well, there's sort of an interesting, and I don't want to go too long on this, but there's an interesting, I think, if people are on the edge, there's an interesting concept to consider about how the alien could be sort of this sacred, integral part to the predator's lifestyle, but not in such a sort of like ham-fisted way as we saw in some of the films, almost akin to like what you would actually see with actual Native American cultures, and like akin to like the buffalo or something like that, that these two species are intertwined in a way that maybe humans are unaware. But that's where I would kind of go if anyone is looking to explore that further.
Okay. Last question. Give me a moment from one of the Alien films that sticks with you that you think about, and or a line or whatever, something that's like, this is what these films are, or this story means to me.
I would have to say that the moment there is, it's the moment in Alien 3 where Ripley shuts the, I guess it's the gated door between her and the Bishop 2 character, and says no. And it's Sigourney Weaver delivers this line in such a powerful way for me, because I feel like you feel every bit of Ripley's exhaustion and her path and the desire to trust the devil, essentially. The devil's saying, here, all you have to do is take my hand and everything will be all right. And Ripley is a character of integrity and of heroism. But what is great is it's not depicted as badass, and it's not depicted as easy. Her heroism is a burden, and it is difficult every step of the way. And I think that's for me, that scene there, the ending of Alien 3 is an emotional high that few films ever get to. I feel such sorrow and elation for what that film delivers in the last moments, especially for Sigourney Weaver and the character of Ripley. And I think it's all defined in that choice that's made right there to shut the door and accept that she's going to have to kill herself to make sure the right thing is done.
Yeah, that is a powerful, powerful scene. Alien 3 is my favorite of the trilogy. And it's hard for me to watch. And I am so emotionally invested in Ripley, and I will always be until I die. I can't barely watch that scene knowing that my space mom is leaving.
Yeah.
It sounds kind of corny, but really, that's how important character is to me. That's the kind of character I want. And when I say that, I'm not saying I always want a Ripley in a film. I'm saying that's how deeply I want to care for characters. Sure. And that's what I look for in Alien films. So you have me there. I wouldn't call it a favorite moment, but it's certainly one of the most emotional moments for me in the series. Awesome. Well, my friend, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh,
Thanks for talking. So everyone knows where to go to find out more about Fanboy Fanbase Press, which is fanbasepress.com. And I would love to have you on again for when the Alien 3 comic releases. We're gonna have a round
the
table.
William Gibson one.
Yeah,
Excellent. That would be fantastic.
Okay,
I
let's
would
do
love
it.
to do that.
Okay,
Just keep up the great work here, guys.
you.
Everything is awesome, and I love Perfect Organism.
Thank you, sir.
Ripley, think of all we can learn from it. It's the chance of a lifetime. You must let me have it. It's a magnificent specimen. Oh, jeez. No pictures.